to point out that what we're doing in here today is going to be part of what we're going to write up for this class as your final research paper. So we're going to write up an experiment that we perform. Today is when you're going to participate in that experiment as subjects so that we can get data, so that we can do the method, do the results, and do the entire write-up. So this is the first part of writing your final research paper, is participating in the experiment today. It's a memory experiment, so you will see words projected on the screen, and then when given the prompts, you'll try to remember as many of those words as you possibly can. Okay, so in this experiment, you will read a list of words, and you will then be asked to recall as many words as you can. So you're trying to remember as many words from the list that you can. So you'll be asked to recall as many words as you can. A countdown will indicate when each new list will begin. So there's 6 lists in total that we're going to be looking at in this experiment, and it will let you know when the recall period begins and when each new list is going to begin. So during the recall period, you're going to get 2 minutes for recall. You might write down the words in any order that you like. So this isn't about getting the words in order, it's just about getting as many words as you possibly can. Then during that recall period, I will also ask you to judge your confidence in your response using a scale of 1 to 4. So you'll notice beside where you write your words, there's another column here that says confidence 1 through 4. For each word, you're going to want to rate how confident you were that the word was on the list. So you're going to rate it from 1 to 4. A 1 means that you are not very sure, and a 4 means that you're absolutely sure that the word was on the list. So if you remember that word on the list, you put a 4 next to it. If you were totally guessing and you're like, well, I think computer was on there, I have no idea, but let's just write it down, then you put a 1 next to that. So you have 1 column of recall, and then 1 column of how sure are you that those words were actually on the list. So once the countdown recall time is over, the next list will start. There are 6 lists in total, and we'll work through all of those for the experiment. Any questions before we begin? All right, let's get ready. Okay, so this is the countdown. These aren't the things you're trying to remember. All right, and remember, only write them down during the recall period. All right, you got 2 minutes. Recall as many words as you can. Work with your group. Everybody has to have the same final list.
Can I ask how many words just went through there?
Nope.
Number of words?
Nope.
I mean, there's a counter right there.
So, again, also remember how confident you are. 1 means not at all confident that the word was on the list you just saw. 4 means absolutely sure that you had seen it.
Do we have to have the same confidence level?
Yes.
Okay.
So for the confidence levels, is a good question. They also have to agree. So if somebody's at a 4 and somebody else is at a 1, decide what the final number should be for the group as a whole. All right, you got 30 seconds left.
Is there, I don't want to say the difference, but is there a difference between like sit?
No.
Okay.
The final scoring, those will count.
Okay. Was it sit?
All right, get ready for list number 2.
No, wait, whoa.
All right, if you're not done list number 1, well, you'll have a little bit of time to get back to it. But list number 2 is on its way.
You're giving me anxiety in a psych class. And I'm verbalizing it because you want me to. I almost wrote it.
Okay, 30 seconds left.
And put it back to those comments.
Just put a giant 4. So by this 5 minutes.
All right, let's get ready for list number 3. It's 30 seconds left.
Straight up, list 5, part.
And get ready for list number 4. Okay, it's 30 seconds left. Okay, get ready for list number 5. All right, 30 seconds left. All right, get ready for your final list. Excuse me. Thank you. All right, 30 seconds left. All right, so that is the end of the experiment. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to begin our analysis of this data. So this is the experiment that we ran. We generated data. People have written down lists of words. They've written down confidence. And in the format that it's in right now, no human scientist could ever make sense of everything. So we had, I believe it was 16 words per list times 6 lists. That's what, 96 words times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups. You're looking at 480 words. multiplied by, I have done this in different sections, you get up to about 10,000 words, and it's hard to wrap your mind around what does that all mean. So one way to get around that in experimental psychology is to use measures of the concept that you're trying to look at. So we want to look at memory and how good was everybody's memory, how well did they do. So we need to boil down these words to numbers that measure that memory. So that's what we're going to do right now with scoring and analysis. So I'm going to pass these out. And the first thing that I want everybody to do is put your name on the front page. And then this is what you're going to hand in so that I can analyze the results so that we'll have data for our final experiment. So put your name on the front. And then if you, if you turn to the back, before we get to that, if you turn to the second page there, if you can just fill out the group ID. So either group 1, group 2, if you remember the number you were, or if you don't, just make a name up for your group. And then if you can just put some demographic information, your age and your sex. This is something that typically, when an experiment is reported, they want to know that information in just about every single journal. So whenever an experiment is reported, you report the subject characteristics, and that lets people know who was in this particular experiment. And usually the bare minimum that a journal requires is what was the age of your participants and what was the sex or gender of your participants. So you can imagine that this experiment that we just did was going to be a lot different if the average age of subjects is 20-something versus if the average age of subjects was 70 versus if the average age of subjects was 2.5 years, right? Very different results would occur. So usually in any experimental report, in our experimental report, you have a section where you describe where your subjects' characteristics were and where they came from. So make sure that you have that information there as well. In this experiment, we're not interested in age differences or age effects. We're not interested in gender differences or gender effects, but it's something that needs to be known so that you can critically evaluate scientific information. All right, so then we get to the meat of the actual results that we have. So for each group, what we're going to do is we're going to now go through our lists. And I'm going to ask you to count up the number of words that you correctly recalled. So I'm going to put up a list in just a moment. And I just want you to go through that and basically grade your responses. Put a check mark next to each one that is correct. So you're going to count up the words correctly recalled. And then what you're going to do is you're going to enter that on the scoring and analysis page in the space labeled number correctly recalled. So you'll see that little section, that little line right there. That's where you put in the number that you correctly recall. So for this, plural forms, conjugations, misspellings are accepted as correct. So if the word was bed and you wrote beds, that's fine. If the word was mountain and you misspelled mountain, that's fine. Conjugations, if the word was rock and you put rocking, that's fine as well. All of those are accepted, but for reasons that will become apparent in just a moment, synonyms are not accepted. So if the word was tart and you put, sour was already up there. If you put tart and sour, those don't count as the same. Those are two different. So synonyms, two different words. So synonyms are not accepted. All right, so there are the lists. So list number 1. Table, sit, legs, seat, couch, desk, recliner, sofa, wood, cushion, swivel, stool, sitting, rocking, and bench. So again, if you put swiveling instead of swivel, if you put 1L, 1M, if you put 1L, if you put 1M on summit, it counts as correct. But if you put if instead of hurt, you put injured, that doesn't count. All right, so go through these, and what I would recommend is that for each list, get a number out of 14, 15, sorry, there's 15 words. So get a number out of 15 for each list, and then at the end, just tally up all the words that you got correct across the 6 lists. So if your memory was perfect, you'll end up with a score of 90. If you were asleep, you'll end up with a score of 0. And then somewhere in between there will be the score for your particular group. The next step, this is for each word that you correctly recall. So now that you have identified which words are the correct words, now what you want to do is you want to add up your confidence ratings for those words. So you're going to enter this on the scoring and analysis page in the total correct confidence rating line right there. So there are the words again if you still have to finalize those lists. But if you got all 90 words and you are 100% confident about each of them, then that'll be 4 times 90, that'll give you 360 in terms of your total confidence. If you didn't get any words, then your confidence level is 0 because you didn't write down any words, but it'll be somewhere in between those. So if you got 50 words, but you're only on average confidence of 2, you'll have a score of 100 for your total confidence. So work on that, and then don't go on to the critical items, because those have a very specific definition, and we'll do that in just a moment. All right, so before we get to the next step, I just want to ask everybody here, did anybody notice anything unusual about the lists? Anything maybe a little weird about the lists?
They kind of all have like a theme. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so these lists all have a shared theme. They all kind of revolve around one idea or one particular word. And importantly, that word is not present. So these lists came from a very influential study, and they've been used a lot in psychology research, because each of these lists has words that are associated with a particular word, but that word is not actually there. We're going to see what those words are in just a moment. But this was based on the experiment that showed the existence of false memories. So up until that point in psychology, a lot had been done on memories, a lot had been done on memory research, and the idea was that memories in your mind work like a filing cabinet. And when you try to remember something, or when you see something and you form a memory, you write down that event on a file, and you take that file and you put it into your filing cabinet, and then later on, when you want to remember something, you, in your mind, go to your filing cabinet and you look it up and you say, oh, hey, there it is. Oh, I remember, we went to the park on that, summer's day. Now, that model was used to explain a lot of things in memory. So, for example, if you misfiled your memory, then when you went there, you'd be like, oh, no, I don't remember what happened. I can't remember that day. If you had brain injury and your file was destroyed, you went there and you're like, oh no, I don't have that memory anymore. So it helped to explain how we remember certain things, and it helped to explain how we forgot certain things. But one thing that it didn't allow for was the idea of false memories. So this experiment showed that not only can we forget things that had happened in the past, but it was revolutionary because it showed also that we can remember things that never actually happened. We can remember things that are false memories. And because of that, the idea of the filing cabinet model for memory got thrown out, and instead this idea of a reconstructive memory process came in. And that's the idea that whenever we try to remember something, we get pieces from all over our mind, and we put them all together, and we form that memory. And if the pieces somehow form an incomplete picture, we will fill in stuff that might be missing, like many of the groups here probably filled in that word that was missing. So that's the topic that we're going to be looking at in our experimental paper. We're going to be looking at false memories, and just as a foreshadowing, we're also going to be looking at the effects of groups on false memories. So everybody in this section of this class either ran this experiment in a group of 2 or a group of 3. I'm going to combine that data with other classes that I ran this experiment in that had group sizes of just 1 individual. They ran it alone. So we're going to be able to see, are you more susceptible to false memory when you're alone, or are you more susceptible when you're in a group? Do you remember more words when you're working in a group? Are 2 heads really better than 1? And what's your confidence like for memories when you're in a group versus when you're individual? Is there a way to tell the difference between a real memory and a false memory via your confidence levels? Are we more confident for real memories than we are for false memories? So all of those questions will be answered when we take a look at the data. But for now, we need to find out how many false memories did we have. So for this, you're going to count up the number of critical items recalled. And in this experimental design, critical items are the words that the lists were designed around, but were not in the actual presented words. So count up the number of critical items that you recall. This should be the same for each person. You're going to enter this in the scoring and analysis page in the space labeled number of critical items recalled. And once again, plural forms, conjugations, misspellings of these critical items are accepted. However, for now, you can see why it's necessary that synonyms are not counted, because many of these words are synonyms for this critical word. All right, so here they are, without further ado. List number 1, chair. Every word had something to do with the word chair, but chair was not on the list. So if you wrote down chair, you have experienced a false memory. List number 2, needle. Everything had something to do with needle. Needle was not there. If you wrote down needle, false memory. List number 3, mountain. List number 4, rough. List number 5, sleep. And list number 6 was sweet. And I actually heard murmurs where people were like, sweet wasn't on the list, it wasn't on the list, sweet wasn't there. Sweet is a false memory. All right, so you're either going to have a score of 0 if you didn't produce any false memories, all the way up to a score of 6 for those false memories. And then just because this won't take very long at all, I'll just let you also know that we're going to total up the confidence levels for those false memories as well. So once again, identify the false memories and then total up the confidence level for that. If you wrote down all 6 critical items and you were completely confident about each one, your confidence level should be 24. If you wrote down all 6 and you were completely unsure about them, your confidence level would be 6, right? So 1 plus 1 plus 1. So wherever it is, write that down in the slot that says total critical item confidence rating. This is one of the things that we're going to take a look at when we take a look at false memories, is basically how are they formed. So what is it about, we'll read research about what is it about these lists that make you form these false memories. And this is something that has become very, very important, because in our current sort of information age, there's a lot of misinformation that's out there. There's a lot of missing information that's out there, and people are having false memories at alarming rates. So, you can see this in the spread of conspiracy theories that were almost gone, 20, 30 years ago. All of a sudden, people believe that the Earth is flat again. I mean, that belief was gone in the 1500s, and somehow it's come back. People believing in other conspiracy theories, people having false beliefs about science, about climate change, about vaccination. All of this came recently, and it's all somewhat based on false memories. It's based on kind of like, hey, I kind of remember that. And they've done studies just to sort of tie this a little bit to the real world. They've done studies about how it's actually harmful to share news stories and point them out as false, right? So if you read a news story and you're like, oh my gosh, this is blatantly, biased or blatantly fake, and you share it on your social media posts and say, look at how biased this news item is, you've actually done less for battling that false item and more for propagating it, because people will forget parts of where that memory came from, i.e. they mentioned that it was false, and they'll remember the actual portion of it. So this kind of work is becoming more and more important, answering these kinds of questions. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at it in this particular class. And that's one of the reasons why we're running this in groups. Because also for the first time, our memories have become very, very social. So I don't know how many times, I can't count it, where I've been watching a TV show and somebody will mention a name or they'll make a reference. And I kind of remember it, but I don't really, so I just pause the the playback and I'll go onto my phone and I'll Google the name or I'll Google the reference. And I'm relying on group memory. I'm relying on somebody else's recollection of this to let me know who this person was or what that event was. So our memory is becoming more social. So experiments like this that kind of delve into what happens with our confidence for these memories, now that we're remembering things in groups can become very, very important. All right, so I think it looks like just about everybody's finished up. So one last thing that I'll mention before we wrap up for today, and I've kind of touched on it already. One of the things that you should try to keep in mind as we go through this methods of experimental psychology is linking what we do in the lab to what we do in the real world. And sometimes that connection can get lost, especially if you're struggling with reading research reports that talk about 6 lists and 5 words per list and randomized across different. Sometimes it gets down to like very nitty-gritty stuff. And in all honesty, most of what happens in the lab is not important on its own. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So I right now got some of you to write down the word chair, where chair was never actually presented. I got some of you to write down the word sweet, and sweet was never presented. If that's where this story ends, I have a nice little parlor trick that I could probably bring out at dinner parties and be like, ooh, did you write down sweet? I got you. Look at the magic. And that's it. That's where it ends. That's what happens in the lab. The real power of experimental psychology is going from that lab and making conclusions about the real world. So the fact that I got you to write down the word sweet, that's what, 30 seconds of wow. I can't believe I wrote down sweet. But what this has to say about our society and the way that we're moving and what we remember and how we remember things in a group setting, and what about the information age, and what about responsible journalism, and what about the dissemination of science, and how should we, all these kind of big movements and all these sort of big questions, we shed light on them as psychologists, sometimes with just lists of words, projected on a screen in a room. So as you go through this, sometimes you might be reading about an experiment and think to yourself, what's the big deal? And it's up to you as a critical thinking individual to try to make those connections and say, all right, lists of words, well, what is the big deal? Oh my gosh, false memories exist. Oh my gosh, they work like this in group settings. What does that mean for the world at large? All right, so that's all that I wanted to do for today. Any final questions or comments, anything? We good? All right, so finish up, if you haven't already, your scoring and analysis. Make sure your name's on the front. Bring it up and just drop it off here on the table, and that is it for today. No, so one last thing before you go, hang on to your booklet, and that'll help jog your memory later on in the semester when we're writing this up. It'll just kind of help you remember what it was that we did. I will also post these lecture slides exactly the way that they are in class today. I didn't do it before class for obvious reasons. I will post these now so that you'll also have access to these, again, to help you jog your memory when we're getting around to writing up that final report. All right?